Coogs house. The schedule is out. The Big 12 matrix is done. And Houston's going to be shown off a lot, but not going to be shown any favors.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougars Daily Podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. Whether a Houston fan or just a hater who came to survive, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day as the everydayer that you are. If you enjoy the conversation but you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below about a great road trip you went on to go see the Cougs, because we're going to be talking about some of those road trips potentially that you could have this year very, very soon. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. We've got more on that fun later. I want to spend two whole segments, first and second, talking about the Houston schedule. The Big 12 matrix came out for who plays who where in Big 12 basketball. That's 2 segments worth. Last segment, do not want to miss. I'm going to be talking about who's on campus visiting Houston as a football recruit this weekend. So let's jump on into it, because Houston, as I mentioned in the open, was a team clearly intended to be shown off, but not given any favors in the way this schedule worked. As you can see on the screen, the image presented by the men's basketball program, your home and home matchups are with Texas Tech, Baylor, and Cincinnati. You will be hosting Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, Kansas State, West Virginia, and Central Florida, and you will be on the road to visit BYU, Iowa State, Kansas, Oklahoma State, TCU, and Utah. And I gotta be honest, there's some parts that I love, right? I love having home and homes with Texas Tech and Baylor. They're both in-state rivals. They've both been good in basketball for the better part of the last decade. A title appearance out of Tech, a national championship out of Baylor. Great coaches in McCasland and Scott Drew. I think there's great things happening there on that part of the matrix here, or at least the Houston portion of it. And then for what it's worth, like, if there weren't better options, Cincinnati is not a terrible option. They have always played Houston very well and very competitively, even dating back to the COVID times, right? It's been a competitive series with them, even though Houston wins more often than not. It's a program that has some weird history in that they are also good at different times in like the 90s and early 2000s and stuff like that. They have good history to their program. Never really timed up with Houston as far as creating that rivalry over time goes, but I do think it's one that functionally works in that instance for a team to get to play home and home with for Houston. It's also a team that came over from the American with Houston, so you can pull at those heartstrings or whatever if you'd like. And if you're Cincinnati, they get to host Houston the home and home. They also get Iowa State, Baylor, and BYU all at home for them. So they're looking at some big time games for a big time season. I do think that they're kind of putting Miller on they're putting their coach in the hot seat there. I think things are shaping up to be important over there, right? So overall, right, not 3 terrible options. You could have some rivalries and all of that. But ultimately, the discrepancy here is of the potential top 10 teams in preseason rankings, and those may not mean anything to you, but if you're looking at trying to quality of schedule, of top 10 teams in America in the preseason, Houston could potentially be heading to 3 of them on the road and hosting none of them at home, right? I guess we'll see what Texas Tech ends up doing, but on the whole here, that's problematic, and it's problematic for a number of reasons, but one of which is the idea of a quad game here. When you look at the discrepancy between difficulty for the home and road games for Houston, the quad rankings, the net rankings, the ranking index, when you're looking at how people get their resumes put together for the big dance, March Madness, people look at quad 1 wins, right? Quad 1 wins is someone that's in the top 30 if you played them at home, at a neutral site would be in the top 50, and is an away game in the top 75. Well, Houston's away games are against teams that will, of course, be in the top 75. They're probably in the top 30. Those home games they've got, the Colorados, West Virginia, Central Floridas, those actually feel like games you'd almost would rather play on the road because they have a good shot of being in the top 75, but a lot hard. It's a much more difficult realization that they could be in the top 30, right? And so to qualify as a quad one game, if you're trying to stack those up to build a great resume for March Madness, having those as home games actually could hurt your resume when you probably beat them wherever you played them if you're Houston, right? And then having the, quad one games being BYU, Iowa State, and Kansas State, and Kansas on the road, obviously those are good teams. We'll talk about them more in the course of the show here. But those would have also been quad one wins had they happened in Houston, and you probably have let's just say in Vegas, you get a better shot to beat them in Houston. I think Houston's undefeated record on the road last year would indicate they'll be okay. Culture travels, all that, right? But really, what you're hoping here, if you're Houston, is that you're hoping that you get like a great year out of TCU and a great year out of Utah, and those teams are in the top 75, and you're hoping that maybe you get an extremely good year out of Colorado and West Virginia or something crazy, and they're in the top 30 somehow, and they surprise everyone, right? Because that's the way this schedule would shape out to have the most quad one wins possible in the Big 12, and it didn't shape out that way for Houston. I don't mean to say it's like Houston's getting screwed. Spoiler alert, they're going to be good at basketball this year. They're going to have a good seed in March Madness, and I think people will be betting on them to make a deep run. I just feel like in looking at this, there was the potential to have at least one of those games in that away slot that is really going to be a tough, challenging game, be a home game, and then potentially flip out one of those maybe easier paths to victory to an away game that would help Houston in terms of having a better chance to win that home game against a good team, and then it could help their ranking in beating that bad team or the worser team. I guess the Big 12 is Big 12, but on the road. And I understand that it's a matrix. It's a 16-team conference. It's not just Houston, and they got to do a lot of different finagling. That's why it's called a matrix, right? But ultimately, Houston seems to be getting the short end of the stick here in a lot of ways, and I see where there was potential for a lot better outcomes here. And frankly, look, I'll talk about why I think that some of this was somewhat foregone before it even started, yada, yada. But I do guess the one thing you can hang your hat on if you're Houston is you get to do the home and home with Tech, do the home and home with Baylor, really build those up. You get to go to Fog Allen, do that magic one more time. And then if you do go undefeated on the road with this slate, I think it's pretty inarguable that you are one of the top 3 teams in America, right? Like that is a gauntlet of a road series there. And so if you can pull that off, really, really hats off. And so we'll talk more about the intricacies of the schedule in one second. But before we get to there, we did say that today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. And Monarch Money is here to help whenever you're spending money and you just can't seem to figure out where all the money went between dining out, online shopping, entertainment. Easy to lose track about wherever your money goes, right? And so that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility on all of your finances, controls all of your things. It's not just a finance or budgeting app, though. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all accounts, investments, and spending in a single place, manage all of your money, and start building actual wealth. I like how I teach, I coach, a podcast, all comes into one single dashboard, all there. I got Wi-Fi income. So it's all one single spot, right? And you can really see where things are going, where things are coming in, and start building towards something with it. Take control of your finances. Monarch Money. Use code Locked On College at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code Locked On College for 50% off your first full year. Parker Haynes is Locked On Coogs here, continuing with some schedule talk and looking at this, how the matrix shook out for the Houston Cougars in the Big 12. And as you look at this, look, there's a couple games in here I think people are upset about. I think people are upset that Houston's going to Fog Allen, Kansas for a third year in a row, right? They did home and homes at Kansas in 2024. They did home and homes at Kansas in 2025. And now it looks like in 2026, they're just going to Kansas. And that's upset some people. I think some people are accurately pointing out like that's a really difficult place to play and you keep sending Houston. But if you're a storylines person, that's one of those ones that was really difficult, but you should have known was always going to be on this schedule. The first game for Houston at Fog Allen in the Kelvin Sampson era was the largest regular season loss, certainly in the time in the Big 12, but in like a recent memory, like decade-long memory. And it was only like, it was just in the teens. It wasn't anything crazy, but it certainly was a humanizing look for Houston, right? Can that happen again? Can someone slay Goliath? Houston's won this conference running away 2 years in a row. Can someone do that? Obviously, they want to put Houston in a situation where that happens. The other piece of the storytelling here is last year, Malik Wilson hit the big shot that was improbable. Houston was down 6 with seconds to go and somehow forced a second overtime and won the game in second overtime and kind of broke Kansas, so to speak, right? We documented that a lot. We had a lot of fun talking about it and a lot of fun ragging on Kansas about it, right? Can they do that again? Can they regain form? Does Kansas get their own payback at home? Like those storylines are already written out, right? Those being typed up right now, right? And that's how those things happen. And I have to say that's kind of why I feel like going to Kansas was one that felt like it was always going to happen on those road games, right? Now, could you have had them in a home and home? Maybe. I wouldn't want to take out Tech. I wouldn't want to take out Baylor. Could you replace Cincinnati in the home and home with them? Would not offend me. Kansas got a pretty busy home and home slate. I get it, right? BYU, I think, is one that Houston fans feel like is another challenging one because BYU is going to have a really, really daunting roster as far as like 5-star talents go, both between AJ DeBonsa, transfer Rod Wright, and the Kep Richie Saunders. I think it's kind of going under the radar a little bit, right? Like they're going to be really good from a talent perspective if they can put things all together. Last year, they were a very like offensive, explosive team, but not a great defensive team, not maybe very physically tough. Houston beat them up. I don't think that will be their problem next year. I do think they kind of recruited some peripheral guys, peripheral of the talent pool, not necessarily like on the perimeter, but that will help with that toughness for them. They're supposed to be a really good team. They're like a dark horse for some people, Final Four, but they're going to want to play in the class, so maybe not even that dark horse kind of program, right? I talked through that really fast, I guess, because I think we talked about BYU before, but that's a program that you're going to have to go play because they came to Houston last year, and so this kind of feels like you're alternating one-offs with them. I will say the 2024 game, when they were a lot less talented, was a really fun, close game to win, but a tough game for Houston to go on the road and win that year with Jamal Shedd kind of like stealing the game there at that point right now. Could Milos, could Emmanuel, could Chris Sinak, could someone steal the game for Houston this year? Absolutely. Again, culture travels, but that's a challenging place to play, a place that wants to beat Houston after how much Houston's beaten them up in basketball the last couple of years, and it's going to be very, very loaded. And so I think that's one that while people might have been upset about, it does feel like it was just alternating. So that's the way that goes. The one that really stinks as far as these like top tier teams on the away slot there, you wish you got at home, right? If you're trying to swap out for a team that can maybe flip with the top 75 that we talked about in the first segment, is Iowa State. Again, a program that got a lot of respect for. They feel like they mirror a lot of things Houston does, built on toughness, built on development, built on getting guys that maybe didn't fit in other programs that fit in very well with what they're trying to do. Now, while we're talking about fit, I guess their coaches' shirts don't quite fit, but that's not really the point here. They're a really, really well-coached team that has a really, really strong culture of their own and ultimately will be pushing Houston around. It's also, frankly, a place that, like when you start talking about losses Houston's had in the Big 12. It's one of the only losses Houston's had as a Big 12 member in the regular season to a Big 12 opponent. And if you count the Big 12 tournament, which is kind of a weird run in and of itself, that Big 12 tournament championship game in 2024 is like the biggest loss Houston's had as a Big 12 member. We'll leave it at that, right? And it's a program-to-program matchup that they're really, really good, right? And so you got to think that they're feeling a little shorthanded because of the injuries when they saw Houston last year. I feel like that's going to be one where they gear up and get ready to go. And that's a bunch of really good games for Houston on the road. They'll be really fun as road trips, or fun to watch on TV, or fun to watch at the sports bar, or whatever, right? I don't want to downplay Arizona coming to town. Cole Pete, they also got Braden Berries and Bryce James, if you're a LeBron James family guy, all coming in that freshman class there. They returned some guys like Awaka and stuff there. They're going to be good. They're always going to be good, right? That's a fun game. I think Kansas State will be better. I think Jerome Tang's going to be kind of coaching for his job in a weird way. I love Jerome Tang as a coach, but I think he's going to be kind of coaching to make sure he gets to stick around. They brought in more talent. They always will. They got the NIL collective going to basketball, right? So they always will. I think the shame for me in looking at this home game slate, though, is in the teams that are just home games, you really kind of have like two that you can tell are going to be fun from afar. Now, there will be some chaos. Maybe Colorado's really good or something, right? But predictably, you got two that are going to be really good, I think. The shame for Houston is that all of their non-conference games are like the good ones are also not played at Fertitta Center, right? You're going to New York City to play Arkansas over the winter holidays. You're playing in Las Vegas and then the NIL Players Classic. You're having to go to Birmingham for the Auburn game. I guess you will get Florida State at Toyota Center, but that's not really the Fertitta Center. These games that are like the marquee games for Houston, by happenstance, right, we're going to be Big 12 games this year, and you got Tech, Baylor potentially, Arizona, Kansas State potentially. And I think there was a lot of opportunity for more. And I think that's where the drag there comes from a fan's perspective on the home games is you don't get to see the Jayhawks come to town. You don't get to see AJ DeBonsa come to town. You don't get to see, in terms of non-conference, you don't get to see Calipari come to town. You don't get to see Bruce Pearl and Auburn come to town, Todd Pettiford and those guys. Like those things, I think, are an unfortunate like culmination of all of this put together, right? I also think it's really weird that, you know, when College Game Day came through Houston last year, or just the chaos of the Houston and Tech game, which Houston did admittedly lose last year, right? It felt like there's a lot of national momentum around, hey, when Houston's good at basketball like they have been, that's a really fun stadium to go to. It's really, the Fertitta Center is a really fun arena to be in, right? And all that push, all that, you know, pub on that leads to a season where there's just not as many of those games. Now, do I think Arizona and Kansas State are going to be chaotic for anyone? Yes. Do I think Baylor and Tech are going to be fun? Yeah. I'm not saying that the ones that they have won't be. They just had the potential to have more. And again, you got to win wherever you play them. It's more about winning the games anyway. I get that. I do think there's a missed opportunity here. And it's unfortunate the matrix done by the whole Big 12 did that, right? And so that's where that goes. I want to talk for the second and the third segment, though, and switch gears over to football, which happens a little earlier in the spectrum here, because some important recruits are on campus as we speak, visiting the University of Houston. So let's talk about who's coming to town in 1 second. Locked on Coogs here, Parker Ainsworth, talking about the big recruiting weekend in Houston Cougar football. Now, I want to stress that is a busy month of June for all Division I football programs as you got official visit season, kids coming on campus, flying through campus, taking their pictures, talking to coaches, shaking hands, kissing babies, doing that whole thing, right? A big thing for Houston, though, is they've got this, you know, ace in the hole. and that is Keisean Henderson, the number one quarterback in the state of Texas, top athlete, et cetera. Is 2026, has been steadily committed to Houston the whole time, shut down his recruitment. We've been talking about that for a second, but if you're new to the program, it's going to be a big deal. He's going to be tremendous, dual threat quarterback, throws in a rope, brilliant kid, wears a raccoon skin cap. It all works. Now, he's on campus this weekend for his last official visit, or maybe it's not last, but his June official visit. He's coming through, right? And I think the weekend they picked to bring him on this weekend is a really, really intentional, because Keisean is a very charismatic kid, a natural leader, and plays the most important position in sports, and that is the quarterback, right? And so he's going to be on campus as like a lead recruiter almost for a lot of these guys. And so as you listen through this, even some guys that are already committed are coming with him this weekend to help like further recruit these big time players on campus this weekend, right? Joining Keisean is Jeremiah Bushnell, is a 3-star receiver from Iowa High School in Louisiana. I always get that backwards. Iowa High School in Louisiana. He actually committed a couple weeks ago. He's like a 6'3" basketball player type, jumps up and catches jump balls. Really, really impressive athlete, plays receiver. And then Xavier Flemings is a 3-star defensive lineman from Louisville. And he's like super excited, poster child, let's go Coogs, rah, excited about being a Houston Cougar, right? So you got those 3 guys, Keisean, Jeremiah, and Xavier, all on campus, or all committed to come to campus, I should say. And they're like here helping the staff recruit, helping build this class out this weekend. The other guys you got coming to campus, you got a couple 3-stars I think worth mentioning here. Tucker Ashford, a 3-star defensive end, 6'3", 240, plays with some pop. He's from a school called Fort Worth Christian, and I think what's interesting on watching his video is like he's very clearly the best like big man athlete on the field when you watch him play. There aren't a whole lot of other big men athletes on the field, though, when you watch him play. So he's like dominating his level of high school football. I wonder how that translates against 6'3", 240. Can he get in coverage and maybe play like a gigantic outside linebacker, maybe trim down a little bit, or he's going to be like bulked up some and play the traditional hand of the dirt defensive lineman? I think that's probably the route it goes. He's already a pretty well-built kid. He's the kind of kid that can make some plays, though, and I wonder if because of the level of football he's playing, which is high-end private school football in Texas, but it's not like 6A football, I wonder if could be a diamond-in-the-rough type get, because he is a good football player that like doesn't get to play against as many 5-star blue chip kind of guys, right? He's not going against a bunch of 5-star tackles every week. It's not going to show the same way, right? Similarly, in the inverse, Brian Castile is a 3-star linebacker from Arlington Bowie, and I wonder if he's playing more like a hybrid safety linebacker spot, and I wonder if kind of like, I don't know what position Tucker Ashford's going to play. Bryson Castile, 6'3", 200 pounds, and wants to hit you, right? Good feet, good hips. I think he's kind of qualified as a linebacker because of that wants to hit you thing. But I think he also moves like he could be an in-the-box safety. And this was like 2003. I'd be like, that dude can be a safety right now because of a whole different position back then, right? I kind of think he's the kind of guy that you get on campus and you just work him out, maybe redshirt him, and by that like redshirt sophomore or junior season, he's played some specials before that, but he really just explodes on the scene because of good development at that point, right? And just like he kind of fits his mold into either being a safety, being a coverage linebacker, being a rangy, maybe even outside linebacker that plays in the hole. And regardless of where that goes, I think that's the kind of guy you could see, say he commits, say he signs, say he shows up. You might not see his name making plays till 2028, but it'll be like suddenly he's making a lot of plays, right? And that's a thing important there. Javon Holmes. Anyway, Madison Prep, Louisiana. Madison Prep's an academic school, 3-star safety guy, 6'2", 200 pounds, officially runs a 4.58. He's currently committed to Louisiana Lafayette. Houston's trying to flip him. I will say I looked on his like stuff online after watching some of his huddle video. He's currently like got Houston and Mississippi State kind of stick out as like big fish as far as who's offered him. I don't really get why. When I watch his video, he kind of looks like to me like any other power conference kind of safety, maybe even a box safety, like that kind of a position. And I'm not sure what about him's hold him into maybe if you don't look at Madison Prep as a place going to produce a bunch of Power 4 football players. I don't know. It is Louisiana, so I would have thought that would help him some too, right? But he's another kid that, like, if Houston can flip him from Louisiana Lafayette, he may get a handful more offers come like September and October as his football season's happening. And if Houston get him to get kind of flip and firm commit right now, I think that's a pretty strong get. And that all leads us to like the two biggest names on campus this weekend. Probably won't commit by the end of the weekend. They're going to play out their summer and get wined and dined by all the big programs. I do think there's a chance of these two kids who are from the greater Houston area both commit to Houston, or at least get one of them. One is Jaden Warren, a 4-star wide receiver from Iowa Colony High School. And this dude's like classic track star, 6'2", $190, went 10-1 in the 100, 21 flat in the 200. His 4x4 and 4x1 teams set state records at the 5A level. He's already visited TCU, SMU, Notre Dame. He's got a couple other schools lined up for the rest of the month of June. He was a receiver at the Navy All-American game, but was not won a whole lot of scoring in that game. I mean, it's kind of hard to like throw an offense together in 4 days or whatever, right? But Dave Campbell's has him as the 4th best receiver in the state of Texas in class 2026. And frankly, you could convince me he's higher than that. The dude's just a natural runner. No one's going to keep up with him run straight line. And having a guy that can take the top off the defense like that with Keisean in the same class, I don't think there's any accident that Keisean and him are on campus at the same time this weekend with that same kind of core memory of the Navy All-American game. Both been recruited and wined and dined by these big-time schools. And Keisean and him would – their games would really link up in a way that really helps one another out. I also think the next guy would help out a lot too. Paris Melvin Jr., Cy Springs guy, obviously right there in your backyard. He's listed as an athlete, 4-star athlete, 6 foot, 170 pounds. I think he's a receiver. I could see him playing corner. I don't know what his 40 time is, but holy crap, this dude's got some of that wiggle stuff. And so if you could get Jaden Warren over the top, you get the jump balls that we talked about earlier out of Bushnell, and you could have Paris Melvin kind of run the wiggle stuff, suddenly your class of 2026 receivers is like complete. Like just like that would lock it all up, right? Now, Paris Melvin's already visited Baylor, Texas. He's scheduled to visit A&M later this month. On most national recruit sites, they got him as a top 150 recruit. He's a big-time name in this thing, right? And again, they've got these guys, receivers especially, on campus with Keisean this weekend because I think they realize like their biggest sell to this receiver class, Paris, Jaden, whomever, Bushnell, it's all you can play with this guy, right? That's like the whole thought process. You can play with Keisean here, right? And I think that's really, really important for what they're trying to do. I also, for what it's worth, think it's a really good sell. If you're a receiver, you can be an all-pro. You meet Calvin Johnson, Megatron, but the dude that gets you the ball is important, right? Megatron went to Georgia Tech. That's the way that goes, right? I think your sell to these guys is, look, Keisean shut down his recruitment. He's coming to Houston. You can come join him. And you can be in that class. Look, we're graduating Boogie, and we're moving on from some other guys. Like, this can be moving in your direction. You can come in and play together, right, and kind of help this turn around, especially for Paris and Jaden, in that they're from Greater Houston, right? Just like Keisean wants to play with Houston across his chest, those guys can get the same sales pitch there from Keisean himself too. And I think that's really, really important. Obviously, as commitments or things like that happen, we'll be here at Locked On Coogs, break it down. If anything happens, chaos, basketball, football, we're here for all that. June's obviously a little bit of a chaotic month, but we're here for it. We're here for it. And Locked On Coogs, subscribe, hit the bell so you know we're live. If you need a second listen of the day, I'm going to recommend listening to Locked On Big 12, Locked On Coogs, primary Locked On podcast network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.